Welcome to the intersection of power and money. You're watching Political Capital on CNBC Africa. It's a story that's been 10 years in the making, and after countless claims that one family, the Guptas, were benefiting from government work helped by the executive powers of former President Jacob Zuma. The Zondo commission, costing 230 million rands and counting, has a mountain of evidence to climb and may take even more money and time than many thought. For now, the biggest commission in South Africa is at least underway. The first 2 days of the commission began in earnest. Day one was really about lawyers doing housekeeping and agreeing on the rules that would govern the commission. The list of lawyers represented here grows by the day, and so too do their billable hours. Day two saw the first witness, Treasury veteran Willis Mcebisi, head of Treasury's procurement unit. Mcebisi told how tender processes had been flouted. Mcebisi said government is the biggest buyer of goods and services in the country, spending a whopping 800 billion rands annually. He was merely laying the ground for what was essentially the heart of the state capture allegations, that a large piece of government spending pie was going to Gupta-linked companies. It was day three that moved the needle. A long-awaited testimony as former Deputy Finance Minister Mcebisi Jonas broke his silence about the Gupta's backdoor dealings, his first under oath. But it wasn't just Mcebisi Jonas who wanted to be heard. The Communist Party raised their voices at the doorstep.
Well, the memorandum was about the concerns that the South African Communist Party has. They want us to investigate what they call corporate capture. They want us to investigate all the malfeasance that is being reported on in government, in state-owned enterprises. And they wanted us to express our commitment to investigate all those matters. Well, fortunately, and as you would be aware, we've just received their memorandum, so we haven't quite applied our minds to all the issues that they raise. Yeah, however, from what I have seen of the memorandum, I think to a great extent, the issues that they are raised are aligned to our terms of reference as a commission. So to an extent that I've seen some kind of alignment, I had committed myself to say, now that they have asked us to respond within 14 days, we will look at the memo in the context of our terms of reference, in terms of the work that we are doing, and respond accordingly.
There are complementary areas, as you say, but there are also deviation. This commission is primarily to look into state capture and the allegations of corruption within the state. It's based on a report by the public protector to that effect. And on that level, you cannot be investigating corporate capture, is it? Is it within your purview?
Well, you see, it depends on their definition. Strictly speaking, whatever they say, the commission will look at it in the context of our terms of reference, in the context of the remedial actions proposed by the public protector, the former public protector advocate Dlamini-Zuma. I think that's the extent to which we can go as a commission. Anything else that lies outside our terms of reference, we may not be in a position to respond to adequately. However, let me indicate to you, you have just seen for yourself, we have just received the memorandum. We have not studied it. Allow us to study it. We have been given 14 days to respond, and I think within that period of 14 days, the Commission will be in a position to respond.
Please indulge me, Mr. Secretary. When you see a few hundred people gathered outside, the same people who just gave you a memorandum now, do you get a sense that the Commission has the support of the public?
My impression is that yes, the Commission has the support of the public. I have not heard of anybody who's opposed to the Commission. I know that there have been concerns that have been raised about the commission. One is the duration of the commission. People would like us to finish our mandate as quickly as possible, and we are committed to that. People would like us to use minimal resources to do our work. To an extent that is possible, we are committed to doing that. But as you would appreciate, we also want to do a good and thorough job to ensure that when the commission finishes its report and hands over its report to the President of the Republic, we are satisfied that it is job well done.
But proceedings did get back to the crux.
Mr. Gupta said that the old man, the president was going to fire Mr. Nene because he could not work with them, which I understood to refer a reference to the Gupta family. He said that, I quote, "You must understand that we are in control of everything," unquote. The National Prosecuting Authority, the Hawks, the National Intelligence Agency, and the old man do, and I quote, "will do anything we tell him to do." He said that the old man intended appointing me as the Minister of Finance. I was at this stage shocked and angered by this statement, and I said that I was not interested in becoming a Minister of Finance. Mr. Gupta ignored what I said. He said emphatically that I must become Minister of Finance because that is what we want, the we want. By that, I would have to work with them. He also said that if I worked with them, I would become very rich, and that he could immediately offer me 600 million. He pointed at Mr. Duduzane and said that they had made him a billionaire and that he had bought a house in Dubai. He said that they worked closely with a number of people, including Lynn Brown and Brian Molife. As a result, they were protected. In other words, those people who work with them are protected. He said that Mr. Molife is very safe and that his career path is very clear and that nobody would touch him and I would be safe too. I said that I was going to leave and stood up to leave. I said that I was not interested in being a Minister of Finance, and if he thought I would work with them, he would have to tell me precisely what it is that they do. At that point, Mr. Zuma and Mr. Hlongwane also stood up. I was angry at the stage, and he was also a bit emotional. He was also emotional. He said something along the lines of, I quote, "Look, do you know who we are dealing with?" He was agitated and said, "You think it is illegal?" He said that everything that they do is legal and that they create jobs and contribute to the economy. He said that at the moment, we, which I understood again to be the Gupta family, earn about 6 billion from the fiscus through various entities, including Eskom, Transnet, and government departments. He said that they wanted to increase this amount to 8 billion, and that they thought I could be helpful in this regard. Mr. Gupta said that they had determined that the National Treasury was a stumbling block for their growth, and that they wanted, I quote again, to clean up Treasury. He said that when I'm appointed as Minister of Finance, I would have to remove the Director General, Lungisa Fundzile, Head of Tax and Financial Sector Policy, Mr. Ishmael Momiat, the Deputy Director General, Mr. Andrew Donaldson, and the then Chief of Procurement, Kenneth Brown. Further, he said that they would provide me with replacement of all of these people, and that they would provide me with the necessary support, including advisors. I said that I was under time pressure, and again encouraged him to set out precisely what they do, suggesting that this would allow me to take an informed decision. For the sake of clarity, my question was not intended for the purpose of seriously considering his offer, but it was intended as a provocation to seek to draw him out in the context of the unfolding state capture phenomenon that we were at that point. trying to make sense of and to determine who was involved. And it was, in a sense, trying to flush them out. I began to walk away, and Mr. Gupta motioned to both Mr. Zuma and Mr. Hlongwane to hang back. And as I was walking to the door of the house, Mr. Gupta directed me to a bar area and said that they were serious about offering me 600 million rand, and that it would be deposited into an account of my choice, and that they could open an account for me. I could stash it in Dubai. He said that to show they were serious, I quote, "I can give you 600,000 rands now and ask," again I quote, "do you have a bag, or can I give you something to put it in?" Unquote. He seemed to want to show the cash to me. I said to him that I did not want money, and I thought he was going to tell me what it is that they do. I said that I was in a rush to catch a plane, but I was returning from the Eastern Cape on Sunday, and he could provide me with a list, and he could provide me with a list of what they do on Tuesday of the following week. And then he told Duduzane to come back, to arrange that I come back the following Tuesday, and that he should tell me to bring a bag.
This was the first testimony that implicated others. Former President Jacob Zuma, the Gupta brothers, former President son Dlamini-Zuma, former Public Enterprise Minister Lynn Brown, and former Transnet and Eskom CEO Brian Molefe. None of these implicated persons have applied to cross-examine witnesses or evidence yet, but they can.
Okay, so you would have listened to his evidence, and he has implicated quite a number of people, including the Gupta families, Mr. Dlamini-Zuma, the former president himself. So what they have done, at least most of those parties, have put an application to cross-examine the evidence of Mr. Mcebisi Jonas, because if left untested, then it stands to be held to be true. So that's the challenge that he wants to bring to the evidence of Mr. Mcebisi Jonas.
Help me understand this. If Lynn Brown, Brian Molefe, Jacob Zuma and the lot really have a problem with what has been said here and would like to cross-question Mcebisi Jonas, would they have to, by definition, participate in this commission too? Would they also have to give testimony?
Well, see, that's the thing. So there's no automatic right to cross-examine. And to an extent, they're not parties and they've even been called. There's not automatic right or obligation for them to appear. It all boils down to what is being applied for and what the chairman permits. So in other words, what evidence is going to be cross-examined by whom and when. And as to whether there will be parties or not, again, it's a question of what the commission decides. With that being said, anyone who has information that relates to the State Capture Commission has been invited by the commission to come and give evidence. So that is an avenue that is available to them as well, including the president, including Lynn Brown, including any other person that has information.
Vasani, this is your first day of the State of Capture Commission inquiry. When you think about the amount of evidence that was presented through various news publications, through various leaks, are you disappointed at the number of witnesses we seem to be having, at short days that we are having?
Well, yes and no. I think there's more to be uncovered. It does not lie with just high-profile persons like the former minister and so on. So to an extent that there are people still sitting with information, critical information, because by and large, the information and the evidence we've received from Minister Mcebisi Jonas is stuff that we are privy to already. It's been in the public domain for so long. So if it's going to be a regurgitation of stuff we've heard before, I mean, of course, it's important that it's in the context of the commission, which is then to be reported to the president. But it's all evidence we've heard before. Vytjie Mentor has already given evidence. Mcebisi Jonas has as well. One would hope that more information is going to come, probably of corroborative value, because what we have now is hearsay. What we have now are allegations that are untested without corroborative evidence. What we therefore are asking for are more people coming out to corroborate what we've had.
What happens if those people do not actually challenge Mcebisi Jonas? What happens if they say, oh well, fine, it's a commission, it doesn't have the same rights as a court, it may not necessarily even get me prosecuted? What happens if those people don't do anything? Then this ends up just as what, hearsay, or is there a case to actually be taken somewhere?
Yeah. Well, the very fact that you don't have corroborative evidence does not mean the evidence itself does not stand, because there's a concept of circumstantial evidence. In other words, when you look at all the information cumulatively, do they make out a case? So it's not the end of the road that there's no one to corroborate the evidence of Mcebisi Jonas, provided the other evidence we hear, albeit not direct, cumulatively viewed, it amounts to circumstantial evidence which the commission can decide on.
And if there's ever been a case prime for cross-examination, it's coming up right after this recess. Welcome back to Political Capital, the convergence of money and politics. This week, the two elements intersected at the corner of Empire and Joubert Street in Johannesburg. This is day 5 for the Zondo Commission looking into allegation that South Africa was on the brink of being sold to the highest bidder. On the 4th day, former ANC MP Vytjie Mentor added fuel to the fire.
You were led down a corridor where you were shown the bathrooms.
Yes.
And is it your testimony that Mr. Ajay Gupta came into the room where you were sitting from that corridor?
From that corridor.
Okay, understood.
And he says, we meet again. And that's when I already said, when the chairperson asked me a question, that when he came, he then spoke about me coming from the Northern Cape, about uranium, and that I could be useful or helpful in assisting them with the uranium that they were to procure for the nuclear build. And he expatiates on my agenda of the PBMR with the president. That gives me a clear impression that he knows what my agenda with the president is. He talks about that project and that I must forget about it. And then he talks about SAA's turnaround strategy, that it was not working and it was not yielding results. And he says to me, SAA burns money. He had also said that PBMR burns money. And then he suggests that if I facilitated the abolition of the SA Johannesburg, SAA Rutenburg, that SAA stops traveling that route.
Let's understand that route again. It's SAA route?
It's Johannesburg, Mumbai, Johannesburg.
Okay.
If I facilitate, if I agree to facilitate its abolishment, that SAA does not travel that route anymore, I could become a minister. He said the president was going to reshuffle his cabinet in the recent future, and Minister Barbara Hogan was going to be reshuffled, and I could become the minister in her place when she's reshuffled, if I agree that once I become the minister, I would abolish the SAA India, South Africa, India, South Africa route. The president walked in the president did not walk in from the entrance that I had used when I entered the house. He walked in from the direction that I was led through when I was shown the bathrooms, and the direction from which AJ Gupta emerged from when he came to join me in the house. The president entered. His entrance was just on while I was getting very angry. He emerged, and when he walked in, I rose from my seat, much as I was on crutches, out of courtesy, protocol, and respect. And he greeted me whilst he was standing and I was standing. AJ remained seated, and I immediately went ahead to tell the president what AJ had said to me, which was in relation to the offer, including the issue of the imminent reshuffle of Barbara Hogan, as he had informed me about. The president sought to calm me down. He did not address the issues that I was putting before him. He repeatedly told me to calm down. I felt that he was not paying attention to the issues I was bringing to his attention, and I felt that he was finding issue with me, rather, with my agitation and with my anger. That further frustrated me. The discussion between the president and I occurred whilst we were still both standing. He continued to calm me down, and I realized that he is not surprised. He is not objecting.
Vytjie Mentor is one of many expected witnesses. How many remains to be seen. Mentor and Jonas have made claims against Guptas and the Zumas that their support for nuclear power came at whatever cost. These costs of finance minister standing in its way began to skyrocket. During Zuma's last years as president, treasury became a revolving door for finance ministers with midnight reshuffle that cost the economy billions. So who will tell this tale? These are among the big names expected to testify, people who feel their political principles have suffered in the face of Zuma's recklessness. The current Director General in National Treasury, Zondo, and some of the officials that the Guptas wanted gone if Jonas became minister, former DG Lungisa Fuzile, Deputy Director General Ishmael Momoniat, former and current finance ministers Pravin Gordhan Ntlanhlanene and maybe even Malusi Gigaba are also expected. The witnesses here are under no obligation to bring forth corroboration as seen with Vytjie Mentor's testimony. It's hard to know which evidence will stick and which will not. One thing's for sure, we're back on your screen this Thursday at 6:30 Central African Time. Until then, keep it CNBC.